And now a very different, but still a very St. Louis story, but this one more anti-establishment. It's about a time and a place, but it's really about an old woman who was once one of the freshest faces in town. In the fall of 2008, people came to the Gaslight Theater on Boyle for a cabaret performance by Fran Landesman, who had flown in from London. For some, she was an old friend. For others, something of a legend.
Shucks. It's wonderful to be back here in St. Louis, and I hope we're all going to have a good time.
It wasn't so much the act, her poems, songs, and sassy banter, but the woman herself who was the big draw. Because Fran Landesman played a central role in one of the city's most interesting, creative, and hippest periods, the era of Gaslight Square.
It's a thrill, but after that, it's all downhill.
It's a well-known story, the rise in the 1950s of the vibrant area of bars, clubs, cafes, antique stores, and, of course, its eventual decline. It all took place around Olive and Boyle, but its roots were in post-war Greenwich Village. St. Louis native Jeanne Landesman had gone to New York and was putting out a literary magazine featuring the works of Beat Generation writers like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg. He met and married Fran, a well-to-do Manhattan girl, who couldn't have been thrilled when she found out that Jay wanted to leave the New York scene and move back to St. Louis.
I thought, well, I could always turn around and go home. And Jay's brother Fred, who was pretty smart, said that he decided to open a bar to keep me from getting bored and going back to New York, and I might well have, which I might have done.
And that's the Crystal Palace.
But the Crystal Palace was a wonderful toy.
The Crystal Palace wasn't just any bar or club, because Jay and Fred Landesman knew talent when they saw it. And they brought in performers who would go on to big national success: Woody Allen, Barbara Streisand, Lenny Bruce, and a couple of guys in their 20s with a nightclub act of folk music and comedy, the Smothers Brothers.
There was about a 5-6 year period, a shining moment there in St. Louis. And
Tommy Smothers was interviewed for a local documentary about the heyday of Gaslight Square.
The Landesmans were the impresarios. They were the ones that they kind of, and Fred, they kind of held court over Gaslight Square. I mean, everybody there was into something. I mean, either a writer or a poet or something, and they were just full of interesting people.
And Fran was in the midst of it all. And she admits she really didn't have much to do with the success of the Crystal Palace. It was more the other way around.
But once we opened that bar, and I met Tommy Wolfe, who got me started on the whole songwriting career, I blossomed. It was, and then also bringing Lenny Bruce and baby Barbara Streisand and all those people. And you know, when somebody said, you may think Fran is a bit of a name dropper, but she really didn't know all those people. I mean, I really did know them.
In 1959, Jay Landesman staged a play at the Crystal Palace based on his life in New York, The Nervous Set. Fred Wolfe wrote the music, and Fran wrote the lyrics. It went to Broadway, but didn't do very well. The Nervous Set was staged again in St. Louis in 2004 by Hotline Theater.
Yeah, that job is beginning to interfere with our fun life.
They started doing the show, and at the same time, other people started recording Tommy and Fran's songs. And there was a couple at the time, Jackie and Roy, I think, who were really famous music performers. And they were recording some of Tommy and Fran's songs, and they were becoming, some of them, standards. Most notably, the big ballad of the show, Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most.
I walk in the park, just a few lonely hours. Spring can really hang you up the most.
The song was actually inspired by T.S. Eliot, whose boyhood home in the Central West End was just across the street from Jay and Fran's.
I love poetry, and I would think of those words of Eliot's, April is the coolest month, mixing memory with desire. And when I got to know Tommy Wolfe, and I listened to all that hip talk, I thought, the way they would say that, April is the coolest month, they would say, spring can really hang you up the most, man.
In some ways, Gaslight Square became a victim of its own success. It became more commercial and touristy, less bohemian, less edgy. There were crime issues, real or perceived, and overall urban decline. And people just weren't coming to Gaslight Square like they once did. And the Landesmans moved on to London. So when Fran returned to St. Louis, so did her friends, old neighbors, and fans of those days gone by.
Absolutely wild. We all lived in Westminster. There was Fran Landesman, Jay and Fran, Hirschfelds, and Paul Landesman. All of us had houses there, and it was just like one big open house and party. Very creative, very inventive, very exciting.
Well, this is a part of Gaslight Square that I missed, so I thought this isn't going to happen probably too often again, so I thought this would be a good time to kind of complete what I missed.
What I felt she brought was an excitement.
Singer Jeanne Trevor was herself a popular Gaslight Square performer.
Ideas and people and music, a new music.
Do you sing her lyrics today?
I sing her lyrics. In fact, I have a CD which I'm going to give her with one of her #1 hit songs, Spring Can Hang You Up the Most, on it.
And in from New York, Broadway producer Rocco Landesman, Fran's nephew, Fred's son. He grew up in that Gaslight Square crowd. Would there have been a Gaslight Square without them, do you think?
Without the Landesmans, I don't think so. No, the Crystal Palace, I thought, was the center of it.
Yeah.
I don't think it ever made any money. It was just a place for them to hang out and invite interesting friends.
That's what Lenny said when he came. The motivation for working is bread, baby.
People still ask her about Lenny Bruce and Jack Kerouac, and she's happy to tell the stories. But Fran Landesman didn't come to St. Louis to revive or relive the past.
My son, Miles Davis Landesman.
Performing is something she only started a few years ago in a London club. She really can't sing very well. She leaves that to the real singers, but mostly does some talk singing and sometimes just recites her poems, which can be poignant, funny, and risque.
Look what I'm doing, and I enjoy it. Getting on stage is like some sort of great medicine. In England, they call it Dr. Footlights performing, because no matter how ill or miserable you might be, when you stand up in front of that audience, the adrenaline rush just cures you of anything that might ail you.
Greenwich Village, Gaslight Square, London in the 60s, songwriter, cabaret performer. This has been one amazing life, still is. Especially for someone who started out with no real plans.
In my wildest dreams, it's exactly what I would have wanted. It's as though God looked down and decided to design a future for me that would give me everything that I ever wanted. And I keep thinking, why? I mean, I'm not all that kind or considerate, or I'm a bit self-centered, a bit selfish. Why has God been this good to me? Knock wood. It's a job to know. Well, I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing.
But like they say, you can't win them all.
St. Louis may have lost Gaslight Square, but Fran Landesman hasn't lost the spirit of creativity and nonconformity and just doing your own thing, even at age 81.
I'm given to smoking and swearing. My lyrics upset decent folk, but my motto is always be daring and piss off. If you can't take a joke,